Welcome to day 3 of the Episcopal Community Services Forum on Justice and Opportunity. I'm Bill Farran, and I'm proud to serve on the ECS Advocacy Committee. We will be examining the so-called benefits cliff today. And if you're hungry for an issue you can really help do something about, this is it. Truth be told, I became involved with the ECS advocacy efforts directly as a result of a prior ECS benefits cliff seminar. I came out of that session mad and motivated. That's because, like many people, I felt good as a citizen that we have federal, state, and local support networks and programs that help people in need with housing, childcare, food, etc. So they have a real chance to get training, land a better job, and become more self-sufficient. That's the feel-good part. What made me mad was to find out that despite apparent good intentions, when people receiving support get an opportunity for more income, they face immediately losing benefits once they cross an income line, which actually sets them back farther. That last $100 a month of a raise could cost them over $500 a month in lost benefits, or more if it involved housing. That is a trap that keeps people down, a form of oppression, if you will. And nearly every program has its traps. I mean, does it make sense to anyone that as a society we would design a program to help people succeed, and that actually succeeding could put the recipient farther behind? It all reminds me of the story of Sisyphus, the tragic mythological character who was doomed for eternity to rolling a boulder up a mountain, and just as he would get near the top, it would roll back down by some unforeseen force. He had his own personal benefits cliff. Yes, I was mad, but also motivated to do what I could do to help policies and legislation to perform surgery on existing programs, if you will, and unwind those traps. This is a highly leveraged point. One change to a program can help thousands of people succeed. Here's a roadmap to our session today. We will first zoom in and learn more about the benefits cliff's negative impacts on individual recipients, and then the positive outcomes seen from coaching recipients, including with the aid of a benefits cliff calculator. And then we will zoom out to examine policy implications and impacts that can be eliminated. Finally, we'll have question and answers. So here's to making you both mad and motivated. Put on your seatbelt and helmet. It'll be a fast ride with some unexpected turns. We have a great panel of true thought leaders in this field. We're so fortunate to welcome Karen Schoellkopf back to the Forum of Justice and Opportunity. Karen is the founder and CEO of Leap Fund. She's dedicating her career to creating products that empower optimism, financial and career growth, the future planning, and providing security for working families that are in need of it. We also welcome David Altig, Senior Vice President and Director of Research at the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. David is here because he and his team at the Fed have taken a deep dive into the negative economic situation created by the benefits cliff, not only for those trapped in poverty, but really for all of us. So let's start with what exactly is the benefits cliff. From the excellent website that Karen created, benefitscliff.com, people face a benefits cliff when they receive public benefits from the government, earn a raise, and then discover that they make too much money to receive benefits. But yet, they are not making enough money to sustain themselves and their household. Karen, you've spent the last year and a half studying how benefits cliffs impact our neighbors. Can you share a story that brings that conundrum to life? So let's start with what exactly is the benefits cliff? From the excellent website that Karen created, benefitscliff.com. People face a benefits cliff when they receive public benefits from the government, earn a raise, and then discover that they make too much money to receive benefits. But yet, they are not making enough money to sustain themselves and their household. Karen, you've spent the last year and a half studying how benefits cliffs impact our neighbors. Can you share a story that brings that conundrum to life?
Yeah, thanks so much. And thanks for having me. I'm happy to talk with you all about this big, meaty problem. So I thought I'd ground us to start with where and how we started. So we started Leap Fund in 2018 by using human-centered, user-centered design. So what that really means is, without the jargon, we spoke with public benefits recipients and community-based organizations that work with folks receiving public benefits. Through this work, we learned that there are two sets of folks that are affected by benefits cliffs. So the first group is a little bit more obvious. They are folks that stand to hit a substantial benefits cliff and face a financial catastrophe for taking more hours or a raise at their job. But the second set of folks that are affected by this are those that are making financially conservative decisions out of fear of hitting a benefits cliff. So the biggest thing to know here is that no one knows if they're going to hit a benefits cliff until after it's already happened to them. So to make this a little bit more real, let me tell you a story. Let's imagine Tanya. So she's a single mother who's working at a fast casual restaurant as a cashier. She's been excelling at her job. Her boss is offering her a supervisor position, which earns $1.50 more an hour. This seems like a really simple decision for Tanya, but her wages alone fail to tell the whole story. So what her boss doesn't know is that Tanya actually qualifies for a childcare benefit, which here in New York City is worth upwards of $900 a month. So if Tanya accepts, her earnings will increase, but she may lose that childcare benefit, which decreases her total income. So to make matters worse, there's no way for Tanya to know if or when she would hit this benefits cliff. So Tanya actually decides to decline the role in fear that she's going to lose the benefit that allows her to work in the first place. So now you're starting to see why being financially conservative is super strategic, right? So here at Leap Fund, the first issue we started to take on was this transparency issue. Not knowing if you're going to hit a benefits cliff is essentially a black box algorithm that runs against folks. So we created a benefits cliff calculator and have since created a benefits cliff coaching program where right now we're working with about 40 partners across the country, not just in using the tool, but also in how to have these very tricky conversations around benefits cliffs. So the second issue that we're taking on is actually that transparency isn't enough. Knowing that you're going to hit a substantial cliff still keeps you from moving ahead. So we're working on a employer-based financial solution pilot here in New York State to start, which we're ramping up this fall. But the end goal there is to actually bridge the cliff to allow folks to get up and over their cliffs and move on towards their ambitions and goals. The last bit that we're working on is data and storytelling. So this is very much around nudging policy, because fundamentally, this is a policy challenge. Benefits cliffs exist because of a policy failure. So we're collecting data that unfortunately no one else is around fear and decision-making, particularly around benefits cliffs. So these are the core areas that we're focused on: finding those cliffs, bridging those cliffs, to ultimately eliminate those cliffs. So I hope that's helpful in sort of putting it in context around what this can mean for an actual human on the ground.
David, I know you have come across some nightmare stories also with respect to people striving to get ahead. Can you share some of that?
Sure. And let me say it's really a pleasure to be able to join you in this forum, particularly a pleasure to join with Karen, because we we're longtime admirers of the work she's done and that the LEAP Fund is working on. Great to have the opportunity to talk about this. I'm going to follow her lead and really talk about how we got into this topic, and maybe more personally how I got into it, which is I'm an economist, and so I was working on a project where we were trying to calculate tax rates at the individual level. And from an economist point of view, taxes are actually not as simple as most people think of them. There's what you hand over to the government, and then there's the part that the government hands back to you. So many of us think of that as like Social Security payments and benefits and such. So we were calculating tax rates that incorporated both that part that you pay out explicitly to the government, but also the part that the government gives to you. Now, many of those things about what the government gives to you are means tested. And this is particularly true for people with lower incomes. And even though I kind of didn't realize it or expected it, when we started to calculate these effective tax rates for low income individuals, we found something interesting. One was that their taxes that arise from benefit cliff problems. So, the question becomes, if I give you $100, how much of that do you get to keep? That's essentially what the marginal tax rate we were calculating was about. And on average, poor people were paying as much as wealthier people in terms of the effective taxes they were handing over to the government. More than that, the circumstances of individuals with low incomes was much more dispersed than people with higher wages and higher income. So we were finding, because we were doing this at the individual level, working with data at the individual level, that we were able to pretty easily find people with tax rates of more than 100%, meaning that for the honor of earning an extra $1, you got to give the government more than $1 back because of the fact that the means tested program that you were engaged in or a recipient of was phased out as a result of getting that one extra $1. Now those are extreme cases. Those are the true benefit cliffs. But I think also to Karen's point, there's extreme but not as extreme cases which are just important. So people who would earn $1 would lose 70 cents of that $1 in lost benefits if they got a raise or a higher paying job or whatever it might be. Well, this struck us as quite troubling. And so then we began to ask employers, workforce development service providers, is this a real thing? I mean, does this really happen out there in the real world? And the answer we got back was yes, absolutely. It happens out there in the real world. And then we began to collect all sorts of stories about how the economic decisions being made by individuals in low income jobs were being disincented from advancing in their careers or other careers, disincented to obtain higher training so that they can move on to better paying jobs regularly. This was not a rare thing. And we would often hear, and so we sort of came to this conclusion is that people are quite rational about this. They know it, but they don't know exactly what the real truth is and whether or not when they're going to hit it, how much can they earn without hitting it. We found circumstances of people who maybe thought they were going to hit it and maybe weren't. And as we began to talk about these things, I mean, one story that stuck in my mind, and this is a little bit of a different story, but essentially I was visiting a representative of a housing authority, and they had a wonderful program that was trying to move people up into higher categories of jobs and higher wages so they could get out of public housing. But they were finding nobody wanted to do that. And the answer for why they didn't want to do that is, well, if I lose my public housing and if something bad happens down the road, I'm not resilient enough and there's not enough capacity for me to get back into public housing. So to me, this is a no-win proposition. And it's, I think our discussion here is to reinforce the reality of this challenge that is being faced by people who want to advance, who have opportunities to advance, but have this whole structure built around them that is really discouraging them from availing themselves of their desires and of their opportunities. And hopefully we'll have a little bit to say about how we might find our way out of that.
Well, thank you. Thank you both for those heart-wrenching stories. I find them to be hard to believe because they're part of a program, that I kind of started to feel good about, and yet when you see it in the actual real world, it doesn't work. Given those current policies, though, I mean, that's the current reality. Participant-focused coaching, Karen, that you mentioned, using a benefits cliff calculator, I understand, has proven to make a big difference. How does that work in our current real world?
Yeah, so I actually wanted to start with addressing the elephant in the room around why wouldn't you want to talk about benefits cliffs in your coaching session, which there are reasons, and they are also strategic and make sense. So, one of the interesting things through this process is, again, we're really user-centered, human-centered design. So we were talking with coaches as we were working on our programs, and we saw that there were many types of coaches, many different coaches that were sometimes hesitant to bring up the subject even at all with their clients. So I wanted to share with you a little bit about the fears first, to just sort of like, let's take it head on here. Like essentially there's a hesitation to start the conversation because until there is some form of a benefits cliff calculator, there's not a very meaningful next step to have with your client. Basically, coaches were saying, well, I can introduce this topic. I essentially introduce this big scary into the room, and then I go, I don't know, maybe not. So keep focused on your goals. Like, it's really hard to keep people motivated when you are also introducing a fear that there really isn't a shape around it. And then the second thing that we heard from coaches is that, for certain types of coaches, let's say for financial coaches or perhaps an employment coach, that they may not be a benefits a public benefits expert. So they're worried about having a conversation that's they're not quite sure how to steer. So I wanted to let you all know, why, instead of me selling you on why Leap Fund would be helpful for coaches, let me talk about why coaches are critical in the work that we're doing. So because there's no place for these conversations to happen, they crop up everywhere. So whether you are talking financial coaching, employment coaching, housing coaching, exactly what Dave was saying, these conversations wind up happening everywhere. And if you are not equipped to be able to talk about them, it's not that they go away. It's just that they're harder to navigate. So we wanted to ensure that there was a way to navigate these conversations with clients and to provide resources around specifically this decision-making that speaks to a client's own ambitions and goals. So this is a space that has a lot of misinformation in it, and there's very little information that's coming from any of the agencies distributing the benefits about benefits cliffs. So again, there's nowhere for people to go. And then they're hearing rumors from friends, colleagues, coworkers about what can happen. So, this can have catastrophic effects. The reason that we are actually working with coaches is to make sure that we can get rid of some of this misinformation. Um, One of the examples that we often give to our coaches is around why it's so critical to make sure that you know what it is that you're seeing when you look at an interface. So earlier this year, there was a pretty heartbreaking story in the news of a young gentleman who was using the Robinhood investment app. He was around 20 years old and was using the app to learn about how to invest. And one day he logged in and he misread the app. The app, what he saw the app telling him was that he lost $730,000. And he got very upset and actually committed suicide. So what we're talking about with our benefits cliff, with our public benefits recipients and talking about benefits cliffs, it's different numbers, but the urgency is the same. This is the financial stability and future for all of these folks that is at stake. So this was a preventable death, and having someone to talk to about and navigate these conversations is critical to this benefits cliff in specific. And then lastly, I'll just share a little bit about what we're seeing in our program. Since we launched our beta program this past year, we have some early learnings I can share with you that sort of underscore what the issue is here. So nearly 50% of the clients that have used our tool have reported that they're going to hit a benefits cliff after they use this calculator. Of all of the clients that have used this, a quarter of the clients were aware of benefits cliffs before the coach had broached the conversation. So that means half of folks are hitting the benefits cliffs. 75% of them don't even know that it's an issue. So this is something that needs to be addressed because people you don't know what you don't know. So some of the things that we've heard from coaches about the impact that this program has had on decision making. This is a quote from one of the coaches. From joining the Leap Fund Calculator program, we are seeing that our participants are weighing decisions to increase hours post-training. So this was an employment coaching program. Using this tool in this program has been motivational to show what the income would be in working full-time hours. So this was from folks that are going from no hours or part-time work to full-time work, and being able to have the conversation around what a benefits cliff could look like for them has been critical. One other thing that I'd like to share with you is how the coaches have experienced this program and how it is helpful for their coaching process. A quote that we had from a coach is, "We've leveraged this program to help participants make smart, data-driven financial decisions based on their own unique circumstances, whether it's requesting an increase in hours or taking or turning down a promotion." And that's exactly what we're hoping happens, that people are able to use this information to inform the decisions that have huge effects on their daily lives, their finances, their family, and all of it. So I'll pause there, but those are some of the things that we're seeing for coaches and their clients.
I think I remember you saying in an earlier conversation, Karen, that your organization is measuring some of the impacts that at least previously have not been measured before. Could you address that for a minute?
Sure. So yeah, we are actually asking people about their decision-making process. There's those two areas that we're really interested at Leap Fund. One is how many people are actually hitting benefits cliffs. And the second is how many people are making decisions out of fear of hitting a benefits cliff.
Yes.
And then from there, in which way are they afraid? Is it in their job? Is it, is it in taking a new job? Is it in turning down a job? Are they worried that if they take more hours, they'll lose core benefits? We've actually had people, I remember one woman coming into us and saying, hey, so, we're trying to figure out if we should have a kid this year. What do you think? Like, Karen doesn't know. This is a huge life decision. But the fact that this is one of those pieces that's a part of the puzzle to figuring out what makes most sense for you and your family and how you plan for your ambitions and goals is really telling.
Yeah, I bet it is. Well, I want to thank you both for those insights and for the important work that the coaches and social workers and financial advisors are doing to mitigate the effects of what we have currently. But now I'd like to suggest that we zoom back out and David, if you could talk about the policy implications that we should all better understand. Can you help us understand the economic impact of benefits cliff in a larger scale and how we can fix it?
I can try. So if pull up my slides and you go to the next slide. So I'm gonna give a concrete example. It's very much like the kind of what the example that Karen suggested at the outset, and think about a specific case and hopefully inject some optimism into this as we think about these very tough problems. So I want to start by saying, our orientation on this is to ask the question that we think someone would ask who is contemplating investing in education, skill training, promotions within a job to increase the economic circumstances of their life. So that's sort of the question we're trying to help people answer. If I get a certificate for a higher paying job, am I going to be better off? Next slide, please. So Karen, was it Tanya? Karen, was that the, yeah, so the young woman that, perfect, we didn't coordinate on this. Although I may have stolen.
We will in the future.
Yeah, I may have stolen some idea from you in the past though. So if, let's consider a young woman like Tanya who is in a cashier job. That was exactly the example. And I can go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics sort of data, and I can kind of tell you what a typical Tanya life is going to look like. Living in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So this is explicitly, if you live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and you're a cashier, if you think about just entering the market this year, 2021, starting full-time wages for this job is about $18,000. And over time, you get experience and you tend to get raises. So over time, that will rise to just over 25,000. So this is what Tanya can expect over many years if she stays in this cashier job. Now, she might say, well, that doesn't look very promising. So let me think about something that feels a little more promising. And I'm going to choose the next a specific example of a nursing assistant. And I'm going to compare this minimum wage job to this nursing assistant job, again, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania specifically. And the red line here is what I just showed you, the cashier wages over time. And the blue line is, well, I'm going to be a little bit low in this green boxed area if this year I decide I'm going to enter on the nursing assistant path, because I got to spend some time getting trained. I may only be able to work part-time. And so my wages are actually going to be pretty low. My income is going to be pretty low this year, during which I'm doing some training, but then it jumps up to the blue line and clearly looks like I'm better off for the rest of my life if I invest in this sort of skill attainment. Next slide, please. But the question is that a very useful comparison that I just showed you? And the answer is no. And this is where the benefits cliff question is going to come in, because what I really want to know is what my all-in take-home pay is. That is, it's not simply what my employer is going to give over to me, but what I get to keep. Next slide, please. So what I really want to equip Tanya with is some picture of what will her net resources look over her lifetime if she invests in this nursing assistant training. And so net resources I'm going to define as everything that you have to support your family, your income you get from your job, plus any public assistance you might receive, minus whatever taxes you have to pay back to the government, minus some calculation of basic expenses. So these could be Alice formulations or just some notion of what the expense profile looks like for this person. Next slide, please.
Dave.
Now, unfortunately, if we had coordinated, I would have called her Tanya.
I was going to say really quickly before you go on, though, do you want to describe the Alice, what it means? These Alice formulations?
It's basically a calculation. It's used to kind of determine what a living wage looks like. And it's a basic set of expenses on food, on housing, on childcare, on medical care, on transportation. It's just the very basics of what you need in the local area to survive. So in this example I'm going to give you, I'm going to keep this young woman who has now shifted names in Philadelphia. And so the basic expenses are what it would cost for all those things in Philadelphia. And the wages is what you would receive in Philadelphia. Now I'm going to pose a particular package of public assistance that that Tanya receives, or Leia receives in this case. And it's going to be kind of basic and kind of typical. It's going to be food assistance like SNAP, various sort of medical care support, could be Medicaid, could be Affordable Care Act subsidies, and then things like the Earned Income Tax Credit, the Child Care Tax Credit, basically things. Notably, I'm leaving out housing subsidies, child care subsidies, because there's a lot of people who don't get that stuff even when they're eligible. So I want to think about what the net resources look like if Tanya Leia moves from this cashier job to this nursing assistant job, once I factor in all this stuff, including the benefits cliff. Next slide, please. And it looks like that, and my Lord, it's complicated. Really, we're facing a really complicated tax problem here. But one of the things you notice is that a lot of that advantage in the nursing assistant job over time disappears. The gap between what you can receive by virtue of investing in being a nursing assistant versus what you would receive by just staying in a cashier job, that gap is not so big for quite a while until 2035 there. And basically that 2035 is when children would move out of the house. So I didn't emphasize this, but it's importantly to this example, she's 25 years old. She has 2 children, aged 4 and 6, which come with an expense pattern, of course, associated with childcare and the food that they have to receive and so forth, so on and so forth. So here's the punchline on the next slide, next couple slides actually, but next slide. If I take that picture I just showed you, which is a little hard to figure out how much better you are off by being a nursing assistant, we can calculate her entire gain over her working life from actually investing in becoming a nursing assistant, getting that training and getting that certificate. And it amounts to just a little under $50,000. So it would be easy to tell Tanya Leia that, if you make this investment, you're $50,000 better off over your lifetime. She may not have a lifetime. And in fact, if I look at the first 3 years after this investment in becoming a nursing assistant, the return over what she would get relative to being a cashier is actually negative. She's actually losing. And the reason for that is that the investment in training and what that cost you is not sufficient once you start factoring in losing benefits to make up for the higher wages she earns as a nursing assistant. Notice that year 1 to 5, I didn't just forget to fill in something there. It's actually 0 gain. So for 5 years, she's as well off being a cashier as she is in making an investment in her future by becoming a nursing assistant. And even over 10 years, the gain is very small. So these lifetime, we can look at wage statistics and say the lifetime benefit to you is large from investing in yourself. And that's sort of irrelevant because the lifetime takes a long time to come along. Now, I said I would get to the good news. Here's the good news. Next slide, please. I can also calculate, because this is basically just a tax calculator, the return to the taxpayer from Tanya Leia making this decision to become a nursing assistant rather than staying in a cashier job. That's the orange bars. You notice that they're always positive. They're always bigger than what Tanya herself would receive in the way of her own higher wages. That is the amount that the government collects because Tanya Leia is receiving higher wages, and the benefit loss accumulate to the government quite a lot. And over the lifetime of this worker, it's $140,000 for one worker. If we can just move them from making a fairly simple jump from a cashier job to a certificate program that puts her in the job, a high demand job, by the way, of becoming a nursing assistant. So the good news rests in this picture, which is every amount in those orange bars gives you the funding automatically from just supporting this skill attainment activity. It gives you the funding to make sure that Leia has an incentive actually to move into these higher paying jobs. You don't even need necessarily to eliminate the benefit cliffs entirely. It'd be nice if you could, but the program has the potential to fund itself. If you do what Karen and I are saying you should do, is put the information in front of you and then begin to kind of deal with what the facts are on the ground are. One more slide and then I'll be quiet. And there are lots of uses for this, for the Leap Fund tool, for our tool. What I just showed you is results from our tool, which we call Cliff. And they can and should be used for career and financial coaching solutions. That's what Karen was talking about. Employer tools so that they know what their proposition to their employees really looks like, and they could reduce turnover if they can get that right. Karen talked about that as well. What I was just talking about was really how you can get the raw material to think carefully about public policy interventions which will solve this problem and how they can be funded and what the proposition to the taxpayer looks like. So with that, that's my part of this pitch. And I'll turn it back over to you, Bill.
Yep. No, I appreciate that. It seems that we not only need coaching of individual recipients, but we need coaching of legislators and policymakers, because it's powerful if those bars are positive. I mean, it would seem to not only argue for a cost-free elimination of the benefits cliffs in a number of these programs, but maybe a sensible income maximum that if the person actually did achieve it, they'd have a living wage. They'd actually be more self-sufficient. Do you have those conversations with, do either of you have those conversations with policymakers?
Karen?
Yeah, I am sure that Dave also has these conversations
Sure.
with policymakers on the regular. We've done it on the local level. We seek to do it on the federal level as well. But really what this also comes down to is the way that policy is constructed. So, if I can take a step back here, our perspective, and I hope I'm not overstepping here, our perspective is that everyone receives benefits. They're just called different things. So, if you're a middle or high income earner, it is very normal to take a mortgage tax credit when you do your tax returns. We view this as very similar to any of the other public benefits that we're talking about in the lower income brackets. So what you can see, though, even in the way that the policies are constructed for middle and high income earners and for the corporate, there is a lot of trust embedded that people will do the right thing. And then for folks that are in the lower income brackets, there is a very, in the regulations, they can be quite punishing for folks through distrust, the way that the regulations are written. So we're not just asking that the regulations be updated, we're asking that we trust people. So that is one of the ways that we're viewing policy, is to trust people. To trust people, the same across the board. If we don't trust over here, we should not trust over here. And if we do trust over here, let's trust over here as well.
Yeah, so we are deeply involved at the level of the governor's office in the state of Alabama, the level of the House of Representatives in the state of Florida, and several other kind of government agencies throughout the country, as I know Karen is as well. On this topic, I would like to point out one thing, is that, and if Karen has found differently, she can let me know, but there is a huge amount of bipartisan support for addressing this issue. When you show it to folks, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle they're on. They all seem to get it, and maybe they have different motivations, I don't know. But they all seem to say, well, man, that has got to be solved. So if you have receptive ears, I'm sure that, we're all willing to make our pitch in any way.
And is there a way to understand maybe some specifics about, maybe in one program, how a benefit cliff could be eliminated?
Yeah, well, so I'm sure Karen, has a lot, her case studies. Typically, the idea will be to figure out what kind of wraparound services that you can supply to someone entering into the workforce development system. It is a system,
Right.
and workforce development efforts to find out. So the first thing is knowledge. Karen said this very clearly from the beginning. You got to know what the people you're trying to serve are facing. And once you know that, you can start to begin to kind of do the sorts of financial counseling that you would do for like someone planning for retirement, which is, okay, you want to get here, you're going to face these obstacles on the way. And so now let's think about how we address the most pressing issues. This is a job for employers, it's a job for policymakers, it's a job for workforce development providers. It's a job, it's going to take a village here to get this done.
That's great. So I thought we might now start our Q&A and have a conversation around some of those topics. One of the ones that has come in is, has the child tax credit had an impact here, or will it have a future impact on the benefits cliff? Either of you.
Well, the answer is yeah. So the pictures I just showed you included the child tax care credit expansion. So they're in there. If they go away, those pictures are going to look different. If they stay, though, that has implications of itself. And again, it's one of these things where, tools like what Leap Fund has developed and the tools that we've developed, I mean, they're really the backbone for kind of getting this right, because you can't address the problem unless you have a pretty precise and full picture of where the problem arises, how it arises. It's going to be different for every single individual. And truth in advertising, in the example I gave you, that was a very specific example. Not every case is going to look like that. Not every case is going to pay for itself. And so you kind of have to get yourself together to think about lots of different scenarios and circumstances and approach them almost on a person by person basis.
The only thing I would add to what Dave is explaining is that this is sort of a holistic, if you have to take a holistic view here, because it's not just one benefit which has a cliff. That would be so much easier to tackle. What it is different benefits across a wide swath, all with different regulations, different income thresholds and asset limitations. They change yearly on different cycles, and they all interact differently. And then how they're implemented state by state is different. So what it really comes to is this individualized picture. And what we would push for is, yes, this the child tax care credit is great. There are so many places that this type of thinking needs to be embedded, whether it's housing, healthcare, and beyond, for all of those things that have the steepest cliffs and keep people parked right at that cliff.
So another question we had is, why has it taken so long to address these issues? Has it been resolved in any jurisdiction that you know about?
Well, so why has it taken so long? That is a great question. I think part of the problem is you can't talk about what you can't name. And so for a lot of folks, we keep using this term benefits cliff, or sometimes it's called cliff effect. These terms actually come from academia, from government use. There isn't a phrase or a way that this is referred to. It's just this low grade anxiety that people sort of talk around. And so if you can't name it, it makes it incredibly hard to talk about. So I think that there had been some groundswell to start talking about this stuff before the pandemic, but I think that the pandemic has laid bare how many people have needed to utilize a variety of different types of public benefits, and the gaps have never been more clear for folks across the country. And then sorry, Dave. In terms of places that they have effectively taken this on, I don't mean to plug our website. It's just benefitscliff.com. And there's a section on there that has proposed and passed legislation. There are some interesting proposals that have come out of Nebraska from Republican Congress folk. There are interesting proposals here in New York State. They're across the country. Not all of them have passed, but certainly people are looking at a variety of programs and how they can mitigate.
Yeah, so I'm gonna to answer the question. I'm going to put on my economist hat again and, simply say employers need workers, and the skill mismatch between the jobs that employers had available and what the kind of supply of those sorts of skills in the market has been growing over time. By the time we got to when COVID hit, this work that Karen and I have been doing and our teams have been doing was really ramping up, actually, right before COVID. In fact, we used to see each other all the time. in
Yeah.
various venues with people talking about it. It kind of lost momentum in a lot of places because of COVID, but all of a sudden now, what's the main problem with the economy? The main problem is not enough workers. And so the time is ripe for striking at solutions to this problem. And as Karen said, there are pilots and proposals all over the place. And at this point, I think we're at the stage where we're trying stuff. And we are kind of figuring out what these solutions might look like.
I think we have time for another question, which is, Karen, can you comment on what legislation can make things more equal? For example, in the lending industry, as you said, things aren't even, or equal trust doesn't exist on, quote, this side and that side, close quote. What legislation could be enacted beyond the rules that are in place today to prevent racial bias in lending, for example?
You're tossing me a hard one here. So I'm going to
Not me.
sidestep the policy, like the which specific legislation. And
Right.
what I'd say is I'd like to back up a second and suggest that we need to start asking more questions on a federal level to better understand the problem. Literally, no one knows how many people face benefits cliffs across the country. There are estimates, there are proxies, but it's not being tracked anywhere. We talk to employers about benefits cliffs and whether their employees are facing them. Many employers don't know about the problem. But for those that do, I've certainly talked to a number of employers who've said, yeah, actually, we have had people turn down a raise or more hours. And I'll say, wow, that's so interesting. Do you know why? Did you ask them why? And they say, well, no, we didn't. So if you take this and you extrapolate it to what is the Department of Labor tracking? They are tracking how many people are advancing and getting new jobs, but no one is actually tracking how many people are turning down jobs. And if they do turn down those jobs, why? So there are so many opportunities to have a better understanding of the issue before we start rushing to solutions. I come from tech industry. You're really, the goal in MVP is always to best understand the problem before you rush to solutions. So I think that as a country, we should better understand the problem.
Yeah, better understand it and to begin to measure it. Exactly. If we're
You
measuring,
can't
measuring
change
the
what you
wrong
don't
thing.
measure.
Exactly. Well, I want to thank both Karen and David for your insights here. And thank you all for, as forum participants. We trust some of you are mad and motivated to do something. Having listened to this session and gained an understanding of how benefits cliffs impacts our participants and communities, as forum participants, you may want to take action now. And ECS can help you do that. If you click on the exhibitors section, it should be right in the margin of your HOVA app. And you can get access to the Advocacy Action booth and then link to the ECS Advocacy Action Center. And there you can contact Pennsylvania State Senator Art Haywood, who happens to be one of our Friday panelists, and ask him to reintroduce SR 344 to conduct a legislative study of the benefits cliff in Pennsylvania. Really something similar to what Karen was just talking about and what David has been working on, to just gain a better understanding of exactly what the situation is, and then identify how to fix it. So I applaud both of you for those efforts. Next time we have a session here, one of the questioners was asking for you to have more of these so people can more deeply understand it. Next time we have a session, let's celebrate the jurisdictions, including the federal government, that have done something meaningful and important. So everyone, please tune in tomorrow for an excellent session on how we can promote a living wage for all. Bill Spriggs, chief economist at the AFL-CIO and professor at Howard University, will be here to enlighten us. I'm looking forward to his conversation with Ashley Putnam of the Federal Reserve Bank, who will be there as well. So thank you for participating. Hope you learned a lot. Hope you're ready to do something about it in terms of contacting Senator Haywood. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks so much.
Well, I want to thank both Karen and David for your insights here. And thank you all for, as forum participants. We trust some of you are mad and motivated to do something. Having listened to this session and gained an understanding of how benefits cliffs impacts our participants and communities, as forum participants, you may want to take action now. And ECS can help you do that. If you click on the exhibitors section, it should be right in the margin of your HOVA app. And you can get access to the Advocacy Action booth and then link to the ECS Advocacy Action Center. And there you can contact Pennsylvania State Senator Art Haywood, who happens to be one of our Friday panelists, and ask him to reintroduce SR 344 to conduct a legislative study of the benefits cliff in Pennsylvania. Really something similar to what Karen was just talking about and what David has been working on, to just gain a better understanding of exactly what the situation is, and then identify how to fix it. So I applaud both of you for those efforts. Next time we have a session here, one of the questioners was asking for you to have more of these so people can more deeply understand it. Next time we have a session, let's celebrate the jurisdictions, including the federal government, that have done something meaningful and important. So everyone, please tune in tomorrow for an excellent session on how we can promote a living wage for all. Bill Spriggs, chief economist at the AFL-CIO and professor at Howard University, will be here to enlighten us. I'm looking forward to his conversation with Ashley Putnam of the Federal Reserve Bank, who will be there as well. So thank you for participating. Hope you learned a lot. Hope you're ready to do something about it in terms of contacting Senator Haywood. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks so much.